Time for tonight's rewrite. Fox News outgoing chief conspiracy theorist Glenn Beck took to his radio show yesterday to issue a dire warning to the country and demanded to know why the FBI hasn't sprung into action from his repeated warnings of a threat, and I quote, worse than 9/11.
Where is the Justice Department? Where is the Homeland Security on the Black Panthers? Where's Homeland Security on the socialist group that are planning revolution? We have them on tape. FBI, would somebody please contact us from the FBI? We've contacted, but we don't get a return call from Washington. Is there anybody left that will take these things on? Is there any department in this country where you can actually call them? Where are the FBI agents? But when you have the leadership of the Department of Justice not pursuing things, you end up with things like 9/11. And I think this is going to be worse.
What you are about to hear is Glenn Beck's notion of what is worse than 9/11. It doesn't involve Osama bin Laden. The mastermind is someone Beck thinks is worse than Osama bin Laden.
Stephen Lerner. When we found this out about Stephen Lerner, the union organizer, where he said, hey, coming in May, we're going to have people collapse the system, blah, blah, blah. We stood around in my office and I said, who do we call? Who do we call? Can't call the DOJ. At least not in advance. We don't want to tip them off. Don't trust them. We call the banks. Don't trust them. Who do you call? The American people. We have got to be self-reliant. We have got to be able to stick together. We have to be able to be around like-minded people, quite honestly. And strengthen our families. Strengthen ourselves.
Yes, Beck is warning you that you have to strengthen yourself against former union leader Stephen Lerner because Stephen Lerner is planning something worse than 9/11. And luckily, Beck has audio tape, of Stephen Lerner's plan. The tape was obtained by Glenn Beck's political news site, The Blaze. It was secretly recorded during the Left Forum in New York City on March 19th. Here's some of what Stephen Lerner said.
And so the question would be, what would happen if we could organize homeowners en masse to do a mortgage strike? To say, if we get 500,000 people to agree, we'll agree we won't pay our mortgages. It would literally cause a new financial crisis. So I think we need to have a very simple strategy. How do we bring down the stock market? How do we bring down their bonuses? How do we interfere with their ability to be rich?
When Stephen Lerner discovered that Beck was on to his plan, rather than flee the country to escape the inevitable FBI arrest, he published his entire plan in an article in The Nation. In it, he repeats what he said at the seminar. Homeowners and students can stop paying unfair debt. Citizens can demand that our governments stop doing business with bandit banks. Stephen Lerner is calling for a rent strike of sorts, this time involving mortgages, in the hopes of causing problems at the banks that hold those mortgages, and in a best-case scenario, forcing the incompetent executives who run those banks to pay themselves smaller bonuses for their incompetence. There's nothing criminal about what Stephen Lerner is proposing. Beck, of course, doesn't know that, but the FBI does. That's why the FBI doesn't return Beck's calls. There is also nothing homicidal in what Stephen Lerner is proposing. And Beck, drowning in the stew of his own madness, doesn't seem to realize that for something to be worse than 9/11, it has to kill 3,000 people. It has to involve the horrible murders of 3,000 people, or presumably more than 3,000 people, to really be worse than 9/11. And so Glenn Beck sits comfortably in his radio studio in New York City, the place hit hardest on 9/11, the cityscape that is permanently scarred by 9/11. And he tells his listeners that a fanciful dream of a mortgage strike that no one would know about if Beck hadn't publicized it is actually a potent threat. A threat with the power to do more damage than 9/11. Stephen Lerner's mortgage strike idea is not going to happen, even with the attention that Glenn Beck and I have now brought to it. But if Glenn Beck really believes that Stephen Lerner is now a threat worse than Osama bin Laden, if he really believes that something worse is coming than 9/11, I beg him to go to his nearest New York City fire station and tell the firefighters there, all of whom lost someone dear to them on 9/11, that something worse is coming. Tell those firefighters all about former union leader Stephen Lerner and how he will do more damage to them than 9/11 did. Or go to any New York City police station and tell them the same thing. There is nothing I could ever say that would make Glenn Beck see what is so vile about his exploitation of the tragedy of 9/11 as a rhetorical device in one of his conspiracy yarns. But New York firefighters and New York police officers can be very persuasive. They could make Beck see instantly what is for them his sacrilegious invoking of their tragedy. But Beck will never do that. He will never talk to them. Instead, he will surely continue to invoke 9/11 or the Holocaust as he has in the past to make any insane point of his choosing. And only in the demented world of Beck will a former union organizer like Stephen Lerner continue to be more threatening than Osama bin Laden.